I have buried men I loved and men I hated, and I will tell you the strange truth of it. The dirt does not know the difference. It takes them all the same. But there is one man I never buried, and he is the only one I think about. I never learned every part of his name. I never shook his hand the way two white men shake hands, with that hard squeeze that says I could break you but I choose not to. He would have laughed at that. He did laugh at it once near the end when I tried it. I am an old man now, and my hands shake when I pour the coffee, and the boy who brings my firewood thinks I am a little soft in the head because I talk to a mule that has been dead 19 years. Let him think it. I have earned the right to talk to ghosts. What I am about to write down happened the winter the snow came early and cruel. The winter his own people put him out on foot with nothing. The way you'd set a lame dog loose on the road and ride off so you don't have to watch it follow. They cast him out before the snow fell. They were sure they were sentencing him to die. They did not know about the cave, neither did I not yet. If you have ever been thrown away by the people who were supposed to keep you, if you have ever stood in a cold field and watched the backs of everyone you belonged to get smaller and smaller until they were nothing, then stay with me. This story is partly yours. Let me start where it started for me, on the ridge, with the snow not yet falling but already there in the smell of the air, the way death is sometimes already in a room before anybody's sick. I was up on the high shoulder of the dragoons looking for a heifer that had wandered off, and I was in a foul humor about it, because a man my age has no business climbing rock to chase a cow too stupid to come home. I remember I had stopped to let Pilgrim breathe. That was my mule, Pilgrim. My wife named him before she passed, on account of he had a face she said looked like he was always on his way somewhere holy and never getting there. She had a way of seeing the comedy in a thing. I lost that when I lost her. Some men keep their dead wife's good qualities going for her. I just kept her mule. So I was sitting Pilgrim, chewing on nothing, when I heard them down below. There is a sound a group of mounted men makes that is different from a sound a few men make. It's a kind of weight in the ground. You feel it in the soles of your boots before your ears catch up. I got down low against a boulder, because in that country in that year, you did not announce yourself to riders until you knew whose riders they were. A pash, a band of them, maybe 40 all told with the women and the horses and the dogs, moving up the wash in that loose, patient line they keep, the line that looks like nothing and could turn into everything in the time it takes you to cock a rifle. I knew enough to be afraid. Everybody out there knew enough to be afraid. I had lived through years where you slept with your boots on and your gun across your chest, where a column of smoke on the horizon was a question you prayed not to learn the answer to. I will not lie to you and tell you I was a friend to them in my heart back then. I wasn't. I was a frightened man with land he was not sure he deserved, in a country full of people who had a much older claim to it than I did, and that kind of fear curdles fast into hate if you let it. So I watched them with my heart going like a hammer, expecting nothing, planning to lie still until they passed. And then they stopped. Not all of them. The line kept on, but 4 of them peeled off, and in the middle of the 4 was a man on foot. A man on foot among riders. That alone made me lean in. Out there, a man without a horse was a man who had been made smaller on purpose. They brought him to a flat place in the wash, an open spot where the sun came down clean. There was an old one doing the talking. I could see the gray of his hair even at that distance, the way he held himself, the way the others gave him the space you give a man whose words decide things. He spoke for a long time. I couldn't hear the words and would not have understood them if I had. But you don't need the language to read a thing like that. You've seen it. We have all seen it. The way a body goes still when it understands it is being thrown away. The man on foot did not argue. That was the part that got into me and would not leave. He did not fall to his knees. He did not grab at the old one's legs. He stood there and he took it with his chin up, and there was a terrible dignity in it that I have only ever otherwise seen in animals. They left him things, I'll give them that. They left him a knife, I saw the old one set it on the ground, not hand it, set it, as if handing it would have been a kindness too far. A water skin, maybe a robe, something dark went down in the dirt beside the knife. And then they turned their horses, all four of them, and they rode back to the line, and the line moved on up the wash and out of the country, and the man on foot was alone. He did not watch them go. That's the thing I have never gotten over. Every other soul would have watched. I would have watched until my eyes bled. But he turned his back on the direction they'd gone, and he faced the other way, faced the mountains, faced the cold coming down off them, and he stood like that a long while. I think he was making himself stop being one of them. Right there in the dirt. I think he was performing some private surgery on his own heart, cutting the cord while it was still attached, because he knew that if he watched them disappear, he would never be able to do what came next. What came next was that he picked up the knife, and the water and the robe, and he started walking, not back the way they came, not down to the flats and the towns and what passed for safety. He walked up, into the high country, into the teeth of the season. And I thought, the way you think a thing without choosing to, plain as a coin dropping into a cup. That man is going to die before the new moon. I should tell you about the snow. People who did not live in that country in those years do not understand what the snow meant up high. Down in the valley it was a nuisance, a few cold weeks, mud and complaining. Up in the dragoons and the Chiricahuas it could be murder. It came fast and it came mean, and it didn't always announce itself. You could have a blue morning and a white grave by nightfall. Men froze 10 feet from shelter they couldn't see. Cattle drifted into draws and were found in the spring stacked like cordwood, where the snow had piled them. And this year it was coming early. Every old-timer had said so. The piñon nuts had come heavy, which was the trees getting ready to die back, which meant a hard one ahead. The deer had moved down weeks before they should have. Even Pilgrim had been off his feed, restless, looking at the sky. Animals know. We've trained it out of ourselves, but they still know. So when I tell you they cast him out before the snow fell, understand that everyone in that band knew exactly what they were doing. This was not a banishment to wander and find a new life in a warm valley somewhere. This was a death sentence dressed up as a choice. They put the knife down so they could tell themselves they hadn't murdered him. We gave him a knife. We gave him water. What he did after that was up to the spirits. I have done that myself in smaller ways. We all have. We hand a man just enough rope to call it his own fault when he hangs. I sat up there long after he'd gone, long after Pilgrim had started stamping and blowing to tell me he wanted his stall and his oats. I sat there and I argued with myself, and I want to be honest about both sides of the argument because I have spent 40 years being ashamed of one of them. The first side said, "That is not your business, Elias Cobb. That is an Apache matter, and Apache matters have a way of killing white men who put their noses in. You have seen what they do. You have buried what they do." And under that, lower and uglier, a voice that said, "One less of them." I'm not proud of that voice, but I'd be a liar if I told you it wasn't there. The second side was quieter. It wasn't even words at first. It was just my wife's face. Mary. She'd been dead 4 years by then, and I'd stopped being able to call her up clear, which is its own kind of grief when the dead start to blur. But I could see her right then, plain as the rock under my hand, and she had the look on her she got when I'd done something small and mean, the look that didn't scold, just waited, the patient look that was worse than any scolding because it left the judgment up to you. He didn't watch them go, Elias, the quiet side said. Did you see that? He didn't watch them go. I rode down. I told myself I was riding down because it was late and a man should be home before dark. I told myself I'd put it out of my head. I did not put it out of my head. I lay awake that whole night with the wind coming up out of the southwest, that wet heavy wind that means weather, and I thought about a man walking uphill into it with a knife and a robe, and not even a backward glance to keep him warm. The snow started before dawn. I heard it stop being wind and start being something softer against the window. By the time the gray came up, the whole world out my door was gone white and silent, the kind of silence that has teeth in it. And I thought, well, that's that then. Whatever I was going to do, it's too late now. I made my coffee. I fed Pilgrim. I sat by my fire in my warm little house that I had built with my own hands on land that other men had bled and been bled for, and I tried to be a man who did not care. I lasted 2 days. On the third day the snow let up enough to move, and I packed a saddlebag like a man packs who is lying to himself about where he's going. Jerked beef, more than one man needs, a sack of cornmeal, a second blanket, a good wool one, not the threadbare one I'd have taken for myself, my old Spencer and the shells for it, matches in a tin, doubled up in oilcloth. I told myself it was a scouting trip. I told myself I was checking my high pasture for stranded stock. I told Pilgrim the truth, though, because there was no point lying to a mule. "We're going to go look for a dead man," I said, cinching the girth. "And when we find him froze, we're going to feel better about ourselves for having looked. That's the whole of it. That's the whole stupid plan." Pilgrim blew out through his nose, in a way I chose to take as agreement. The going was bad and slow. The snow was thigh-deep in the draws, and the light off it hurt your eyes by mid-morning. I followed the wash up toward where I'd seen him, though of course the snow had eaten every track there ever was. I don't know what I expected. A shape in the white, maybe. A dark heap that would tell me the story was over and I could go home and grieve a stranger in comfort. I found his first sign near noon, where the wash narrowed and the wind had scoured a stretch of rock half bare. A scrape. Just a scrape in the thin snow where a moccasin had pushed off climbing. And then higher, snapped off clean at the height of a man's reach, a branch of mountain mahogany, broken, not by weather, by a hand, a marker, the kind a man leaves when he wants to find his own way back, or wants to be sure he's not walking in the circle that the lost always walk. He was alive when he made that, or had been. I want you to understand something about tracking a person through deep snow and killing cold. It is the most intimate thing I have ever done with a stranger. You read every choice they make. Here he rested, see how the snow's packed where he sat, and the dark spot where he set the water skin down, and didn't it freeze the water? Didn't it freeze solid and useless by the second night? Here he stumbled, see the gouge, the place where he caught himself with a hand. Here he stood a long time, and you wonder what he was looking at, and you look at it too, the long white reach of the canyon and the mountains beyond going blue with the cold, and for a moment you are not tracking him. You are with him. You are the same animal, leaving the same prints, asking the same God the same question. By late afternoon I had climbed higher than I had any sense being, into a side canyon I'd never had reason to enter, a tight place where the walls came in close and red-black, and the snow lay in the shadow blue and untouched. My breath was loud. Pilgrim was laboring and unhappy, and I'd gotten down to lead him by then. The light was going. I knew, with the flat certainty of a man who has spent his life outdoors, that I had maybe an hour before the cold turned from hard to lethal, and that I would not make it home, and that I had been a fool, a sentimental old fool, and that the two of us, me and the mule, were now in real danger over a dead Apache I'd never spoken a word to. And that is when I saw the smoke. Just a thread of it, pale against the pale rock, almost nothing. You'd have ridden past it 10 times in summer. It came up out of the canyon wall itself, it seemed, out of a crack in the red rock half hidden behind a stand of dead juniper. Smoke means fire. Fire means a man alive enough to make it. I stood there in the failing blue light with my heart doing something complicated in my chest, half fear and half a feeling I did not have a name for yet, and I understood 3 things all at once, the way you understand things on the edge of dark and cold. The first was that he was alive. The second was that he had not just stumbled into a hole to die. That smoke was steady, controlled. The smoke of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, who had a fire built right, who had shelter, real shelter, against this rock, in this canyon nobody knew about. And the third thing, the thing that put a cold finger right down my spine, colder than any wind. He hadn't been walking uphill to die. He'd been walking home. To something he'd built. Something he'd hidden. Something he had made ready a long, long time before his own people ever set that knife down in the dirt, as if some part of him had known, for months maybe for years, that this day was coming, and had quietly, patiently, in secret, prepared the one place in the whole frozen world where a cast-out man might live. I did not know yet what it would cost me to learn the rest of it. I did not know that finding him would crack my life in half, the life before and the life after, and that I would spend my last 40 years on the afterside, talking to a dead mule, unable to explain to anyone why a single winter with a man I could barely speak to had made every other year feel like a held breath. I only knew that the smoke was there, and that I was cold, and that I had come too far to turn back. I led Pilgrim toward the crack in the rock. The juniper scratched at my face. The light was nearly gone. And from inside the dark of the stone, I heard the unmistakable, oiled, final sound of a knife being drawn, and a voice, low and steady and not afraid, say one word in English, the only English I would hear him speak for a long while. A man can hold very still when a knife is somewhere in the dark in front of him. I had not known I could hold that still. I stood with Pilgrim's lead rope going slack in my fist and the last blue light dying out of the canyon, and I did not so much as turn my head. "I got food," I said into the black crack in the rock. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "I got blankets. I'm an old man and a fool, and I tracked you up here from the wash. I'm not law, I'm not army. I run cattle down on the flats and I watched them put you out and I couldn't." I stopped. The next word would have been sleep, and it sounded too soft, too much like something a woman would say, and I was ashamed of it. "I couldn't leave it," I finished. Nothing, the smoke kept rising, steady as a thought. "I'm going to set the bag down," I said. "Right here. And I'm going to back off and you can take it or not, but my mule is about done and the cold is going to kill us both inside the hour, and I would consider it a kindness if you'd let me stand by that fire long enough not to freeze to death. After that I'll go. I swear it on my dead wife, who'd be ashamed of half of what I am and is the only reason I came. I don't know why I told a stranger about Mary. It just came up out of me. Maybe because in the dark you say true things you wouldn't say in the light. Maybe because I had a feeling, and it turned out right, that this was a man who could hear the difference between a lie and the truth the way some men can hear a wrong note in a song. There was a long silence, the kind of silence where you can hear your own blood. Then the voice said, "The mule first." I didn't understand. "Bring the mule in," he said, with a small edge of impatience now, the impatience of a practical man dealing with a slow one. "It will die out there. Then it will draw wolves. Bring it in. Then you." The crack in the rock was barely wide enough for Pilgrim, and he didn't like it, and I had to talk to him the whole way, the foolish soft talk you talk to an animal you love, while behind me the cold pressed at my back like a hand. 3 steps in, the passage turned, and the wind cut off all at once, the way a sound cuts off when a door shuts. 4 steps more and it opened up. I have been in a few churches in my life. Not many. I am not a church-going man and never claimed to be. But I will tell you that walking into that cave was the closest I ever came to the feeling those buildings are supposed to give you, and never did. It was not large. A man could have crossed it in 8 strides, but it was made. That was the thing that stopped my breath. This was not a hole an animal had found and a desperate man had crawled into. Somebody had worked here, for a long time, with patience that bordered on the holy. The fire sat in a ring of fitted stones in the center, under a natural flue in the rock that carried the smoke up and out, that thread I'd seen. Banked low and clean, no waste, the fire of a man who knew that fuel up here was life, and you did not burn life to feel cozy. Around the walls, on ledges that had been chipped flat and level, sat the evidence of months of preparation. Baskets, sealed baskets, a dozen of them more. Dried meat hung in dark ropes from pegs driven into cracks. Bundles of grass seed, Cakes of something pressed and dark that I later learned was mezcal, baked in a pit somewhere out in the warm months and carried up here load by load. A stack of cut wood, seasoned, taller than a man, set back where the damp wouldn't reach it. Water skins full hung where the fire's warmth would keep them from freezing. Snares coiled, a bow unstrung in oilcloth, a second knife, a bone awl, needles of bone, sinew. And in the back on the flattest ledge of all, where the firelight just reached, a child's cradle board. Empty, old, the lacing gone gray with age. I took all this in the way you take in a thing too big to take in pieces, none of them adding up yet. And then I looked at the man. He had stepped back to let Pilgrim and me come in, and now he stood across the fire from me with the knife still in his hand, though pointed down now, and I got my first real look at him. He was younger than I'd thought from the ridge. Hard to say his years, that country-aged a face, but younger than me by a good stretch, maybe 40, maybe less, with a body that was all rope and economy, no waste on it anywhere, same as his fire. There was gray starting at his temples. There was a scar that ran from under his left ear down into his collar, a deep old one. And his eyes, in the firelight, were doing the thing his whole body had done in the wash when they cast him out. They were taking a blow and refusing to show it. He was studying me the same way I was studying him, reading me. And whatever he read, it made him slide the knife back into the sheath at his hip, slow, like a man putting away an argument he might still need. "Sit," he said, "by the fire, not the mule's side, there," he pointed. I sat where he pointed. We did not become friends that night. I want to be clear about that, because the way these stories get told later, two men meet in the snow and by morning they're brothers, and that is a lie that does a disservice to how hard the real thing is. That night we were two animals sharing a den because the alternative was death, and we both knew it, and we watched each other. He let me eat from my own bag, would not touch my food then, though he watched me eat it with a flat attention I understood. He was making sure I wasn't poisoning myself to lull him, or just relearning, after days of having nothing, what it looked like when a man had plenty. He gave Pilgrim water from his own store, which I marked, because it was generous, and because it told me he valued the mule's life on its own terms, not just as a thing of mine. I tried once to thank him. He cut me off with a small motion of his hand, not rude, just final, the way you'd wave off smoke. "You came to watch me die," he said. "It wasn't a question and it wasn't quite an accusation. And I did not die, so now you have to decide what you are." He poked the fire. "That is your trouble, not mine. Sleep." I lay down by the fire on my own blankets with my Spencer along my body where I could reach it, and I noticed he noticed, and I noticed he didn't seem to mind, and somewhere in the noticing I fell asleep, more tired than I had ever been, in the safest dangerous place I have ever slept. The storm sat on those mountains for 9 days. I learned later this was the great storm of that winter, the one the valley still talked about years on, the one that killed 7 men and God knows how many cattle and one whole family up on the Sulphur Springs flat who were found in the spring still sitting up around a cold stove. 9 days of snow and then wind, and then snow again, the canyon mouth packed solid, the world reduced to that one stone room and the fire and the two of us and the mule. There was no leaving. There was nothing to do but survive and learn each other, and survival is a thing that teaches two men more about each other in 9 days than 9 years of easy weather ever could. His name, I learned, was a word I could not say right, and that he eventually, with a tired patience, shortened for me into something my white mouth could manage. Dassin. I never knew if that was truly part of his name or a thing he gave me to stop me mangling the real one, the way you give a child an easy word for a hard idea. I called him Dassin. He called me, after a few days of calling me nothing, Mule Finder, which he found funnier every time he said it, and which was, I came to understand, his way of saying he had decided to let me be a person. And in those 9 days, in pieces, the way the cave itself had revealed itself to me in pieces, I learned why his own people had thrown him out to die. It was not cowardice. I want to put that down plain because it was the first thing I'd assumed, sitting up on that ridge, and it shames me. I'd looked at a man taking a banishment with his chin up and I'd thought coward, because that is the lazy story, the one that lets the watcher off the hook. He must have done something low. He had done something high. That was the trouble. It came out slow, over days, in the spare way he talked, never the whole thing at once, sometimes only after a long silence while he worked a snare or fed the fire. I will not pretend I got every part of it right, and I will not put fine speeches in his mouth that he never made, because he was not a speech maker. He was a man who said the necessary thing and stopped. But this is the shape of it as I understood it then, and have turned over every winter since. His band had been running for a long time, hunted, the army behind them, and ahead of them the reservation, which to them was a slower death, a death of standing still. The old one who had spoken in the wash, I'd been right that his word decided things, had been holding a hard line, that they would not surrender, would not go in, would die free in the high country before they'd be counted and fenced and fed like horses. And there had come a moment some weeks before when the band had taken a thing on the trail, a wagon, settlers, a family. I did not press him on the particulars and he did not offer them, and there are some things I am glad I do not know. But what he told me flat looking into the fire was this: there had been children in that wagon. And the decision before the band, a decision made in the cold logic of people being hunted, people who could not feed or carry captives, people for whom a child's cry on the trail could mean discovery and the end of everyone. The decision had been the kind of decision that war makes, and that no one should ever have to make. And Dassin had refused it. More than refused. He had taken the children, 2 of them, a boy and a girl, the boy hurt, and in the night he had carried them down and left them where a patrol would find them, a thing that risked the whole band, that gave away the country they were in, that broke the old one's word and the band's own grim necessity and the one law that had been keeping them alive. We do not divide, we do not weaken, we do not let one man's heart endanger all. He saved 2 children who were not his people, and in doing it he became, in the eyes of the band, a man whose heart could not be trusted to choose the people over the stranger, a man who, the next time it mattered, the next time it was their children or the enemy's, might choose wrong again. So they did not kill him because he had done a thing that was, by some older law none of them could quite name, not evil, but they could not keep him, because a band on the run cannot carry a man whose mercy is a danger. So they put the knife down in the dirt, and they rode away, and they let the snow be the one to do what their own hands would not. Was it the right thing? I asked him. I don't know why I needed to know. The children, was it right? He looked at me for a long time across the fire, and then he said the thing I have carried longer than anything any preacher ever told me. I do not know if it was right, he said. I know I could not have lived in the other one. He looked back at the fire. Right is for people who get to stay home. Out here you only get to choose which thing will live inside you after. The empty cradle board, I will tell you now, was his daughter's. She had died 2 winters before. I never learned of what. I learned it from him only sideways. Once, when I asked why he had built this place, this hidden room of plenty up where no one would ever find it, years of secret labor for a day he could not have known would come. He was quiet a long while. Then he said he had started it the winter the girl died, that when she was gone he had understood something about his people that he could not say to them and could barely say to himself, that they were going to lose. Not this battle or that one, all of it. That the soldiers were as many as the snow, and the band was getting smaller every season, and the day was coming, by surrender or by death, when the life they were defending would be over. And he had not been able to stop preparing for it. A man whose child had died had learned the hard way that the thing you love does not survive on account of you loving it. So some animal part of him, grieving, had started carrying mezcal cakes and seed up to a crack in the rock that nobody knew, building a place where something might last the winter, even if it was only him, even if it was only the proof that he had refused to simply lie down. He had not built it to save himself from his people. He had built it before he had any idea his people would be the ones to put him out. He had built it against the whole world, against the future, against the snow that was always, in the end, coming for everything he loved. "You built a place for your daughter to be safe," I said before I could stop myself, and she was already gone. I thought it might be cruel to say. I have a habit of saying the cruel-sounding true thing, but he didn't take it cruel. He looked at the gray laces of the cradle board, and something moved across his face that was the closest he came, in all our time, to breaking. "Yes," he said, "and now it is keeping an old fool and his mule alive instead." He almost smiled. The dead build for the living, they do not get to choose who. The setback came on the 7th day, and it came from the mule. Pilgrim had been getting weaker. The cold, the close air, the strange feed Dassen had stretched the fodder with, something had gotten into him, and on the morning of the 7th day he went down on his side and could not get up, and his breathing turned to a wet, tearing sound I had heard before in animals and never once heard come right. I will not be ashamed to tell you that I wept. A grown man, weeping over a mule in front of a stranger. He was the last living thing that had known my wife. He had carried her. She had named him. When I lost him, I lost the last warm body in the world that had touched the woman I'd built my whole life around, and I knelt in that cave with my hand on his neck, and I cried like the snow was coming down inside me. Dassen watched. He did not tell me to stop. He did not tell me it was only a mule, the way another man might have, a practical man, a man who'd been hungry for 9 days and was looking at a great deal of meat going to waste. He waited until it was over, until Pilgrim had gone still and I had gone empty. And then he came and crouched by me and he put his hand, the first time he ever touched me, flat on the dead mule's shoulder beside mine. And he sang, low, just a few lines in his own tongue, words I never understood and never asked him to explain, because some things you understand without the words. He was singing for my mule. He, who had lost a daughter and a people and a whole way of living in the world, who had every reason to look at a white man's grief over an animal and feel nothing but the bitter math of survival. He sang my dead mule down into the dark with the same care, I would swear to it, that he'd have used for one of his own. That was the night I stopped watching him to see what he'd do to me. That was the night I understood that the question he'd put to me the first hour, "Now you have to decide what you are," had finally been answered, and not by me. He had answered it, with his hand on my mule and a song I couldn't understand. We ate the mule after. We had to. The food was stretched thin and the storm showed no sign of breaking, and a body has to be a body before it can be anything finer. He did it respectfully, and I helped, and I will not pretend it was easy, and I will not pretend Pilgrim would have wanted otherwise, because Pilgrim was a mule and mules do not want. But I knew Mary would have said, "Better he keeps you alive, Elias. That's the most use any of us ever are to each other in the end." The wind howled at the mouth of the cave. The fire burned low and clean. 2 men who should have been enemies sat in the warm dark of a dead girl's storehouse and stayed alive on the body of a dead woman's mule. And out beyond the snow, though we did not know it yet, something was coming up the valley that the cave was not built to keep out. Men, with a reason to climb into killing cold, with a reason that had my name on it as much as his. But that is the last part, and I am tired, and the boy will be here with my firewood soon, and I find I have to stop a while before I can write down how it ended. The storm broke on the 10th day, and the silence that came after it was almost worse than the wind. Wind is at least company. The silence after deep snow is the silence of a thing that has finished its work. We dug out the canyon mouth together, Dassen and me, taking turns with a flat slab of rock in our hands, and when we finally broke through to open air, the light off the new snow was so white and total that I stood there blind and weeping with my hand over my eyes, and Dassen laughed at me. The first full laugh I ever heard out of him, short and surprised, like it had escaped before he could stop it. "Snowblind in one breath," he said. "How did your people take this country from anyone?" "We didn't take it fair," I said, blinking the tears down. "We just had more of us and worse manners." He looked at me sidelong. I think it was the first true thing I ever said that he hadn't already known about me, and I think it cost me something to say it, and I think he knew that too. We stood in the mouth of the canyon and looked out at a world made new and terrible and beautiful. The dragoons stood white and silent all around. The air was so cold it had a taste, like iron, like the inside of your own mouth. Down in the valley, miles off, you could see a few thin threads of smoke standing straight up in the windless cold, the homes that had survived. I counted them without meaning to, fewer than there should have been. I thought of the family on the Sulphur Springs flat, though I didn't know about them yet, didn't know their stove had gone cold with them still sitting around it. I just had a feeling, looking at the gaps where smoke should have been, that a great many things had ended while we were buried. And down on the snow of the lower wash, fresh, dark, unmistakable, the day after a 10-day storm when no sane man should have been moving. Tracks, horses, many of them coming up. Dassin saw them the same moment I did. I felt him go still beside me, that whole-body stillness I'd seen in the wash a lifetime ago. "Yours," he said, not a question. I knew he was right before I could think why. They were shod horses. Even at that distance you could read the difference in how the snow broke. And they were coming straight up our canyon, not casting about, not searching. Coming straight, as if they knew. And then I understood, and the understanding sat in my stomach like a swallowed stone. I had told a man, before the snow, the third day when I packed my bag of lies and rode out to find a dead Apache. I'd stopped at Halloran's place on the flat to borrow a length of rope, and Halloran had asked where I was headed in weather like that, and I, soft old fool who could not keep his own mouth shut, I had said something. Not the whole of it, but enough. Saw them put one of their own out up in the dragoons. Going to go see if there's anything to it. I'd said it the way you say a strange thing you've seen, to be saying it, to feel less alone with it. And Halloran had 2 boys in the ground from the raids of '71. And Halloran was the kind of man who, given a winter to brood on it and a thaw to ride in, would put 2 and 2 together and come up with there is an Apache up in the dragoons alone and helpless, and I know roughly where. I had done this. My loneliness had done this. I had wanted to tell someone about the man who didn't watch his people ride away, and in the telling I had drawn a line on a map straight to him. "That's my doing," I said. My voice came out wrong. "I told a man I'd seen you before. I didn't. There was no end to that sentence that wasn't a lie. I did it. It's mine." Dassin didn't curse me. I almost wish he had. He just looked at the tracks coming up and did the arithmetic he'd been doing his whole life. The arithmetic of how many and how far and how long. And then he looked back into the cave at the stores and the fire and the gray cradle board. And I watched him understand that the place he'd spent 2 years building in secret, the place that had outlasted his daughter and his people in a killing storm, was now found, was now a trap with one mouth. "How many guns do you have?" he said. "The Spencer and the shells," I swallowed, "maybe a dozen good rounds." He nodded slowly. He was not afraid. I have known a great many men and I have seen real fearlessness exactly twice. And both times it frightened me worse than any coward's panic, because it meant the man had already made his peace with the thing the rest of us run from. "Then it is simple," Dassin said. "You go down, you meet them on the wash. You are a white man they know. You tell them you found nothing. You tell them the snow took the Apache, you saw the body, you buried it. There is nothing up here but an old fool and his dead mule." He almost smiled at his own joke. "You send them home. They won't believe me." "They will want to believe you," he said. "That is different. They have ridden a long way in the cold to do a thing that, looked at in the light, is murder of a starving man. You give them a reason to turn around and keep their hands clean and be home by dark. They will take it. Men always take the door you hold open for them. It is the only mercy you can count on in your people. They love an excuse to not be what they came to be. It was a good plan, it was the right plan, and I could not do it. And if they don't take the door, I said, if Halloran wants to come up and see the body for himself. Dassin looked at me, and there was something in his face then, gentle and terrible, that I have spent 40 years trying to name and have never managed. It was the look of a man who has already decided how it ends and is only deciding now how much of the truth to spend on you. Then there is no body, he said, and you say the wolves took it and you bring them up here and they find an empty cave, because by then I will be over the back of this canyon and into the high country where shod horses cannot follow in this snow, and they will curse you for nothing and go home. He paused. That is what happens, if you go now. I want to tell you I believed him. I want to tell you I didn't see, even then, the lie inside the plan, that the back of that canyon was a wall, that there was no over it, that a man on foot in chest-deep snow and killing cold goes exactly as far as the first slope before the mountain stops him. I want to tell you I was fooled. I wasn't fooled. I saw it. He watched me see it. And he held my eye and dared me to say it out loud, to make him say it, to turn his quiet sacrifice into a thing we'd have to talk about. I didn't say it. That was the kindness he asked of me and the only one I had left to give. I didn't make him say that he meant to lead them off into the snow, away from the cave, away from me, and lose them and not come back. I didn't make him say that the plan ended with him face down on a slope somewhere, so that an old fool and a dead girl's storehouse would go on undisturbed. I'm not going down there to lie for you, I said, my voice shook. I'll go down there and tell them the truth, that you saved 2 children, that you're a better man than the whole sorry pack of us. You will get yourself killed, he said, and me, and it will mean nothing, because Halloran does not want a better man. He wants a dead one to set beside his dead son so the scale feels even. You cannot argue a man out of his grief with the truth. I know this. He said the last part quietly. I know this. And I thought of his band riding away from a man whose mercy they could not afford, and I understood he had been on every side of this there was. Here is the choice I had to make. I have laid it out for you slow because it was the hinge of my whole life, and I want you to feel the weight of it the way I did, standing in the snow with the horses coming up. I could do as he said. Go down, lie well, send them home, and he would slip out the back and into the high country to die alone and free, the way he'd told his own people he wanted, and I would go home to my warm house and my long life, and I would have, in the strictest accounting, saved him, saved the cave, saved the secret, saved the version of the story where the cast-out man beats the snow and his enemies both. A clean ending, the kind I am told people like. Or I could refuse, stay, make a stand at the mouth of a cave with a dozen rounds and an old Spencer, against men I'd known 30 years for a man I'd known 13 days, and we would both almost certainly die, and it would mean nothing, exactly as he'd said. 2 more frozen bodies for the spring. There was a third thing. There is always a third thing, and it is always the hardest, because it is the one that asks you to live with what you do instead of die out of it. I could go down, and I could tell them the truth, not all of it, not the speech, but the one true thing that might turn them. And I could put my own name and my own face and my own 30 years of being a known and trusted man in that valley between Halloran and the canyon, and stake all of it, every ounce of standing I had, on talking them down. And if it failed with me standing in the open and Dassin already gone up the back where they couldn't follow fast, buying him not safety. I knew it wasn't safety, but time, a head start, a chance, the only thing any of us ever really gets. It was the coward's brave thing and the brave man's cowardly thing all at once. It risked everything I had and guaranteed nothing. It let me believe I might keep us both alive while admitting I probably couldn't keep either. It was, in other words, the only thing I could live in afterward. He taught me that. Right is for people who get to stay home. You only get to choose which thing will live inside you after. I chose the thing I could live in. I won't draw out the part on the wash. It is the part I remember least, which is strange, given it nearly ended me. I remember the cold sun and the horses blowing steam in Halloran's face, older than I'd let myself notice he'd gotten, grief worn into it so deep it had stopped looking like grief and started looking like the shape of the man. There were 6 of them. I knew 4. That made it worse, and it made it possible both. I told them the snow had taken the Apache. I told them I'd found him froze and I'd buried what the wolves left, up a side draw they'd never find, and that there was nothing up here now but a old man whose mule had died and who was a damn fool for coming and meant to go home and never speak of it again. I told it plain and tired and true sounding, because most of it was true, and the false parts I'd hidden inside the real grief I was carrying, which was the grief for Pilgrim, which I let them see, which did more to convince them than any words. And Halloran looked at me a long time, and I will never know what he believed. I think I have decided over 40 years to think that he knew. That somewhere in him he knew I was lying, knew there was a living man up that canyon, and chose in the end to take the door I held open, to go home and keep his hands clean and not become, on a cold thaw morning, the thing he'd come up the mountain to be. Dassin had been right about that, about the door. He'd been right about almost everything, except the one thing he'd lied to me about. They turned around. They rode back down. I sat my borrowed horse on the wash and watched their backs get smaller and smaller until they were nothing, and I understood, finally, all the way down, what it had cost him to not watch his own people do that, weeks before, in the same cold sun. When I climbed back up to the cave, he was gone. He'd taken almost nothing: the bow, a water skin, a little dried meat. He'd left the stores. He'd left the fire banked for me so I'd have warmth for the climb down, and on the flat ledge in the back where the firelight just reached, he'd set the gray cradle board upright against the stone, facing the mouth of the cave, facing out, the way you'd set a thing you wanted to be looking toward the light. I have asked myself 10,000 times why he left it. I think I have decided to think that he was done carrying it, that the cave had done its last work, had kept an old fool and a mule alive instead of a daughter, the dead building for the living, and that he was going up into the high country to be free or to be dead, and either way a man does not need a cradle board for that. He left it for me, or he left it for the cave. Or he left it because grief, finally, after 2 years, had to be set down somewhere, and a man can only set it down by walking away from it, by turning his back, by not watching it get smaller behind him. His tracks went up the back of the canyon, up the slope that had no over it, into the snow that swallows shod horses and a man on foot just the same. I did not follow. He hadn't wanted me to, and I had learned by then to give a man the thing he wanted instead of the thing that would make me feel better. That was the last lesson he left me, and I have tried to live by it, and mostly failed and tried again. In the spring, when the snow came off the high country, I went up and looked. I am not proud of it. I had told myself I'd respect his leaving, and then I went up and looked anyway because I could not stop, because the not knowing was its own kind of snow that wouldn't melt. I found no body. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where a man's wanting can make him see things. I found no body. I found, far up, near where the slope eased toward the high meadows on the backside, a thing that might have been a sign or might have been nothing. A branch of mountain mahogany snapped clean at the height of a man's reach, the way he'd marked his way up the wash that first day, the way a man marks a trail he means to come back down. It might have meant he made it over, that the snow that should have killed him let him through, that he reached the high country and went on, free, the way he'd told his people he meant to end. It might have meant nothing at all, a deer, the wind, an old break I read a story into because I needed one. I have chosen for 40 years to believe the branch, not because I think it's true. I am too old to lie to myself about what's true. I believe it because, as he taught me, you do not always get to choose what's right or what's real. You only get to choose which thing will live inside you after. And I could not live in the cave with the cradle board facing out and a frozen man on a slope. So I live in the branch instead. snapped clean at the height of a man's reach pointing up. I am the only one who knows the cave is there. I have never told a living soul, not in 40 years, and I am telling it now only because I am near the end, and a thing this size should not go all the way into the ground with one old man. The boy who brings my wood will find these pages when I'm gone. He'll think they're the ramblings of a man who talks to a dead mule. Let him. Maybe one winter, when he's older and the world has put him out into some cold of his own, he'll remember there's a place up in the Dragoons, behind dead juniper, in a crack in the red rock, where a man who'd lost everything built a room against the end of the world. And maybe he'll go up. And maybe the stores will be long gone, but the room will still be there, made, fitted, holy, waiting. The dead build for the living. They do not get to choose who. I think about him most when the snow comes early. I think about the chin up in the wash. I think about the song over my mule. I think about the door he told me men always take, and how Halloran took it, and how I have spent the rest of my life trying to be the kind of man who holds doors open instead of the kind who needs an excuse to walk through dark ones. They cast him out before the snow fell. They were sure they were sentencing him to die. They did not know about the cave. And I do not know, I will not pretend to you here at the end, that I know whether the branch was his, or whether the high country took him, or whether somewhere out past where my eyes or my hopping could follow, an old man older even than me is sitting by some fire I can't see, telling some boy I'll never meet about a fool who tracked him up a mountain to watch him die, and didn't, and learned instead.